The ancient Near Eastern world was a verbal, visual, and textual world, in that order. Coins, from as early as the Persian period, also contained images. The vast majority of people could not read or write. While many people may have known what writing was and had some level of functional literacy, for example, could spell or read their name and basic words, only elite scribes could be called truly literate. More dominant was the visual world. Common people encountered art imagery, or iconography, on a much more consistent basis. For example, images were used on stamp and cylinder seals and in temple and palace walls. Many households would have had figurines, such as these naked goddess figurines, and other clay objects adorned with images. Even pottery, such as this Philistine bichrome pottery, was often painted, albeit mostly with abstract designs. However, the most common means of communicating ideas in the ancient Near East was through the spoken word. From myths to family histories and stories to public proclamations and interpersonal oaths, words had power. A significant part of orality was the use of verbal imagery, metaphors and verbal images that conjured up mental images, which were often linked to visual images that ancient Near Eastern people would have been familiar with. These verbal and visual images then influenced the written word. What we have is a very visual world in text, image, and word. Iconography refers to the study of visual imagery as well as to the art imagery itself. This brief video lecture will introduce you to ancient Near Eastern iconography. Additionally, this lecture will also briefly introduce the method of iconographic exegesis, a way of reading texts in light of the verbal imagery contained therein. Since the rediscovery of the ancient Near East in the 19th century by Europeans, images have been excavated, recorded, and transported to museums and other collections. Whether it was the Assyrian reliefs or statues of famous kings, the visual image has always contained a type of power. We find visual images from all over the ancient Near East and from throughout its history. In fact, writing itself, both in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, began as pictographs, images that communicated an idea. All throughout the ancient Near East, various types of images, from abstract designs to animals, are found on various types of media, from pottery to tiles and even carved stone. On stone stelae and bronze figurines and various other types of media, we find images of humans, deities, and even human-deity interactions, such as the Hammurabi stela. We also find pictures of both war and peace, such as the Standard of Ur from the 3rd millennium city of Ur. We also find various forms of daily life in ancient Near Eastern iconography. This stone relief from a palace in Nineveh depicts the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal and his wife having a time in their garden. Along with the sublime, we also find the gruesome. The observant viewer will find the head of a defeated Elamite king hanging in a tree in this scene. Iconography from the ancient Near East is found on various types of objects and media, from papyrus to clay and stone, cylinder seals, coins, on the walls of ancient Near Eastern palaces, and even figurines. However, as ubiquitous as images were in the ancient Near East, curious students may find it difficult to break into this new field of study. It can be difficult to know what to look for, as well as where to look for images from the ancient Near East. Interested students can find ancient Near Eastern iconography in 3 main forms: physical, print, and digital. For physical forms of ancient Near Eastern iconography, one should look at a museum or other public display, for example in situ in ancient Egypt and Israel. Many museums throughout the United States and around the world have significant and very interesting displays of art and artifacts from the ancient Near East, including the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Oriental Museum in Chicago, the Toronto Museum of History, and many other museums. One can also look at catalogs and compendia, which provide numerous pictures of ancient Near Eastern artifacts. There are also detailed studies and monographs that provide in-depth discussions and studies of art and artifacts in the ancient Near East. And more increasingly common are online databases from museums and other institutions, which provide catalogs and pictures of ancient Near Eastern artifacts. As much as it is important to know where to find images, it is also important to know how to study the images. Similar to how we study texts, one can study or read an image through multiple means, including a detailed study of the image or images. That would be similar to morphology and grammar. Or one can study a constellation of images. That would be akin to studying syntax. One can also study larger scenes or pictorial narratives. This would be akin to literary criticism. And lastly, one can study the historical, rhetorical, and archaeological situation of images. This would be similar to rhetorical criticism. A relatively recent field of study or method of studying text and images simultaneously is iconographic exegesis. Many texts from the ancient Near East employ verbal imagery, which was meant to evoke the kinds of visual images that people encountered on a daily basis and would have been familiar with. Unfortunately, without understanding what these images actually invoked, readers risk superimposing their own false mental images onto the text. To see what the original readers would have seen, we have to steep ourselves in the visual world of the ancient Near East. Many psalms and other biblical texts, for example Psalm 104, employ numerous images to describe the God of Israel or Yahweh. One such set of images that is used to describe the God of Israel is solar imagery, similar to the way in which the Egyptian god Aten was referenced. In fact, Psalm 104 has many similarities to the so-called Great Hymn to Aten. The verbal imagery in Psalm 104 is opened up or illuminated through the study of ancient Near Eastern iconography depicting a winged sun disk or even the sun disk of Aten. Through the study of ancient Assyrian, Israelite, and Egyptian iconography depicting suns, we open up the socio-visual linguistic context in which Psalm 104 was written. Through the study of ancient Assyrian, Israelite, and Egyptian iconography depicting suns, we open up the socio-visual linguistic context in which Psalm 104 was written. Iconographic exegesis is more than simply associating word and image. It requires studying the way in which metaphors and images were used in a text, as well as the socio-visual context of the visual image to which one is comparing the verbal imagery. This helps us to understand the beliefs of ancient authors and the association those authors were attempting to make through the verbal imagery they employed. The payoff to both iconographic exegesis, as well as to simply studying ancient Near Eastern iconography, is multifold. We get to see what the ancient authors and audiences saw. We replace our preconceived and often ill-conceived notions with more accurate representations. We gain a greater understanding of the socio-visual world of the text. And ultimately, we understand better the metaphors and images that influence the ancient authors and audiences. For more information, you should check out these resources and the websites displayed here, as well as the numerous resources that each of these references cite.